My daughter locked the door and said, "You don't live here anymore." But I forgot to tell her something. I stood outside, flowers in hand and my heart in pieces. I never imagined that the love between a mother and daughter could reach this point. Her words were cold, calculated, and the door closed like a final statement. But inside me there were still commas, untold stories, silences too heavy to carry alone. What my daughter doesn't know is that there's a past hidden between us. A secret I've moved around so many times that I ended up losing myself. And maybe, if she knew everything, she wouldn't have left me on the other side. If you've ever felt like you lost someone without understanding why, this story will speak to you. It's not about perfection. It's about pain and choice. It's about love, even when it fails. I'm happy to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment with the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I brought flowers. I know it's a small gesture, but it was her birthday. A part of me wanted to believe that, despite the time that had passed, there was still room for kindness. I climbed the stairs of her building with a racing heart, rehearsing what I would say, trying to sound natural. But when I knocked on the door, the response was an uncomfortable silence. I waited a little longer, and when the door finally opened, I didn't recognize my daughter's eyes. They were cold, calculated, as if I were an inconvenient memory. "What are you doing here?" she asked. I tried to smile, to offer the flowers, but she didn't even look at them. The world seemed to shrink. "Samantha, I just wanted to see you. It's your birthday." The words came out fragile, as if apologizing for their existence. She didn't answer, just took a nearly imperceptible step back. Then, she reached for the doorknob and said, with a calmness that hurt more than any scream, "You don't live here anymore." That pierced right through me. I stood there, paralyzed, not knowing whether to cry, to beg, or to simply walk away. It was as if all the years I had dedicated to her had evaporated in a second. A stranger in front of my own daughter. And before I could say anything, the door closed slowly, unhurriedly, with decisiveness. She looked at me as if I were an intruder, and locked the door. I went home in silence, like someone returning from a funeral. My mind refused to accept what had happened, but as I sat alone in the living room, the details began to surface, like fragments of something that had always been there. I remembered the text messages that went unanswered, the calls that went straight to voicemail. For the last few months, she was always busy. A new project at work, trips, meetings. I convinced myself it was normal, that young people need their space. But there was something in the silences, something in the absences that hurt more than I wanted to admit. The truth is, I didn't want to see it. I remembered the last dinner where she barely looked me in the eye. The previous birthday when she sent me a blunt message. The canceled plans, the evasive excuses. There was always a logical, rational justification. But the affection was disappearing in small doses, like a slow poison. I would smile, pretending not to notice, because accepting it would have been too painful. Now I realize it was all there, screaming in silence. The distancing didn't happen all at once. It was a subtle, careful construction, and I contributed with my passivity. Maybe if I had asked. Maybe if I had listened more attentively. But maybe I was also afraid of what she might have said. Maybe this started long before, and I didn't want to see it. Eric came to my door in the late afternoon. He always knows when something is wrong, even if I try to hide it. "You went to see her, didn't you?" he asked, in that low voice he uses when he wants to protect me from the world. I nodded without answering. He offered me tea, but I couldn't accept anything. I just wanted to hide. We sat on the porch, not speaking. The cold wind seemed to match what I felt inside. He respects my silences, which is why he's the only one I can still stand to be around. After a while he ventured, "Maybe she just needs space, Christine." I wanted to believe it, but I couldn't. That locked door still echoed. I didn't cry in front of him. My crying has always been private, secret, like everything about me. But when he left, and I was alone again, I broke down. It wasn't just about today's rejection. It was for everything I had built that was now crumbling. Childhood memories, little hands hugging me, smiles that seemed eternal. Where did it all go? I sat for hours in the dark, replaying each scene as if they were pieces of a lost film. Her words hammering in my mind, like a verdict. Maybe I deserve this. Maybe the past has finally collected the debt for what I've hidden for so long. But part of me still wants to fight. She doesn't want to see me, but she doesn't know what she's rejecting. I wasn't there, but I could picture the scene clearly. Samantha opening up to Rachel, as she never opened up to me. She needed someone to listen, and she chose a friend, not her mother. Part of me resented that, but another part understood. I also had my time of hiding hurts where it felt safest. My mother always painted a convenient version of the story for me, she would have said. She said my father left, that he never got in touch again. But since I was a child, I felt that something was missing from the story. Rachel, with her attentive ear, must have encouraged every word. And Samantha, carrying those poorly healed wounds, opened up completely. She remembered how I avoided the subject, how my tone would change whenever his name was mentioned. She said it was to protect me. But who protects with so much silence? Her voice must have trembled, not with emotion, but with anger. An anger that grew with her, fueled by gaps and half-truths. Samantha needed a clear narrative, and I gave her only shadows. Maybe out of fear, maybe out of shame. Now those shadows were turning against me, distorting the image she had of her own childhood. And what hurt the most was knowing that, unintentionally, I had contributed to it. She always said he left, but I never believed it. Claire greeted me with that look that mixes exhaustion and judgment. We hadn't seen each other in weeks, but it seemed she already knew everything. "So Samantha locked you out?" she asked without any softness. I nodded with a sad smile, hoping for some compassion. But Claire was never one for unnecessary tenderness. "Did you really think you could keep everything buried forever?" The question landed like a direct blow. I sat at the table, seeking comfort, and found only recriminations. "You always wanted to control the narrative, Christine. But you forgot your daughter has eyes." I knew Claire spoke with a mixture of anger and protectiveness. I tried to explain that the silence wasn't out of malice, but out of a self-preservation instinct. "You protected yourself, not her," she retorted firmly. It hurt to hear, but maybe she was right. I had hidden behind excuses for too long. Claire didn't mince words, and her judgment weighed more because it came from someone who knew my ghosts. "She's going to find out anyway," she concluded. "And when that happens, it might be too late." Those words lingered in me like a warning. I had waited too long, trusting in a timeline that no longer belonged to me. And maybe now the only chance to win Samantha back was to face the past head-on. "You reaped what you sowed, Christine." I returned home with a tired body but a racing mind. Claire's words reverberated within me like a ceaseless bell. I sat in front of the mirror, looked into my own eyes, and asked, "For how long? How long will I sustain a half-told story that has only served to keep invisible wounds alive?" The truth about Peter has always been a weight on my chest. He didn't just leave us, he chose to forget us. But out of pride, for protection, out of fear of breaking what was left between my daughter and me, I hid it. I told her he drifted away when in reality, he turned his back with cruelty. I remember the day he left. Without a note, without a goodbye. Samantha was only 6 years old, and I had to invent smiles to hide the emptiness. Now I see that the silence wasn't a shield, but a prison. She deserves to know who he really was. Even if it makes her angry, even if she blames me for having omitted it. I wrote everything down on a piece of paper, with trembling hands. Each sentence was a scar being reopened, but I preferred it this way in writing, because I don't know if I would have the strength to say it all looking into her eyes. She needs to know, because this is the first crack we need to heal. Samantha needs to know who he really was. But telling her this means opening an old wound. I found out from Claire that Rachel has been trying to convince Samantha to listen to me. At first, I felt a sense of relief. Knowing that someone still believes we can reconnect gave me a thread of hope. But Claire also warned me. She's hesitant. Still very hurt. I don't blame my daughter. What I built with silence now weighs like a betrayal. Rachel seems to be that rare type of person who sees nuances where others see only blame. She must have said something like, "Your mother loves you. Maybe you need to hear what she has to say." But Samantha is stubborn, like me. And when she feels hurt, She builds high, thick walls. I imagine my daughter saying, now she wants to talk after years of silence? Because that's how she sees me. A woman who hid, who manipulated, who disappeared behind excuses. Even if I kept quiet to protect her, I understand that, to her, it was a disguised abandonment. And maybe I deserve this judgment. What torments me is knowing that, even if I tell the truth now, she might doubt it. Because time corrupts even sincerity. And if Samantha is convinced of a version she built herself over the years, maybe there's no room left for mine. What if she's lying to get rid of her guilt? I couldn't sleep that night. The words surrounded me, insistent, as if begging to be spoken. Talking face to face seemed impossible. She wouldn't let me. So I took a pen and paper and began. My hand trembled, my chest ached, but I kept going. It was my only chance to reach my daughter without being rejected by her gaze. I started by saying I loved her. Simple words, but they had lost their strength from not being said so often. Then, I dove into memory. I told her how Peter drifted away slowly, how he lied, how he left. I wrote about the days she would ask me about him and I would make up excuses, just so she wouldn't suffer more than she already was. The page filled with confessions. I didn't try to justify myself, that wasn't the point. It was about opening the windows of a house that had been locked for too long. In the end, I only asked that she read it with her heart, not with her anger. I folded the letter carefully, as if folding what was left of our connection. I left it at her door early in the morning. No one saw me. I returned home with a chest that was both light and heavy at the same time. Because now, even if she rips up the letter, at least the words exist outside of me. And as much as it hurts, it was time to let them live. Each word was an attempt to rebuild a broken bridge. Claire called to tell me that Samantha had picked up the letter. Since then I've been waiting. Like someone waiting for rain after a long drought. But what I didn't know was what the letter would provoke. Not just tears or memories, but an even greater confusion. Because memories are not reliable when mixed with pain. Samantha read it with teary eyes, according to Rachel. But it wasn't a cry of emotion. It was one of revolt. She remembered her father, not as the man who disappeared, but as the one who, one night, cried as he hugged her for the last time. If he abandoned us, why would he cry? She would have asked. And once again, I became the villain. A child's memories don't come with subtitles. What she remembers is feeling, not context. And if he cried when he left, perhaps he planted in her the illusion that he was taken away by force. My letter, instead of clarifying, sparked a conflict between what she remembers and what she was now hearing for the first time. How can I compete with the image of a crying father? I wonder if, in trying to open the wound, I only made it bleed more. Samantha doesn't want another villain. She wants solid ground. And maybe the truth, in the way it arrived, only made that ground sink further. But why would he cry? If he was the one who abandoned them? Claire showed up unannounced, as she used to do when we were younger and shared everything, including our silences. I opened the door, and she came right in with her practical manner, her eyes serious, as if carrying a warning. You're going too far, Christine. I remained silent, waiting for her to say what was already written on her face. She sat on the sofa, adjusted her purse on her lap, and sighed deeply. You've already done your part as a mother. Reopening this now will only cause more pain. I wanted to protest, to say that the pain is already here, that Samantha doesn't speak to me, that every memory I hold has turned to ruin. But Claire didn't want to listen. She wanted to end it. She has this gift of turning truths into rules, as if protecting the past were synonymous with maturity. Maybe the best thing is to let it go. Things will work themselves out with time. I smiled faintly, a bitter smile. Time doesn't fix what was never said. Time just accumulates weight where there once was space. But she insisted. You don't owe anyone anything, especially after everything you've been through. And that's when I realized, Claire didn't just want to protect me. She wanted to protect something bigger. A silent pact that perhaps even I hadn't realized existed. Some things don't need to be dredged up, Christine. The silence that followed was dense, almost palpable. Claire looked at me with a sorrow that didn't match her usual rigidity. I think it's time I told you something. I felt my body stiffen. I wasn't expecting confessions, especially not from the one who always seemed to know everything. But there was something broken in her tone. She spoke slowly, like someone treading on thin ice. You wanted to tell her. When she was 12. I remember. I closed my eyes, the memory returning with clarity. I was the one who convinced you to wait. To hide. To protect. My hands clenched over my knee. I did remember. But I had buried that fragment along with so many other guilts. Claire had always been the family's moral compass. When she said something, it was like a sentence. And back then, I was too fragile to disagree. You weren't ready, Christine. She wouldn't have understood. It was too much. She said that now, but the truth is, she was the one who wasn't ready. And I obeyed out of fear. The revelation pulled the rug out from under me. Because now, part of Samantha's pain was also the responsibility of the woman sitting in front of me. And the worst part was realizing that, in an attempt to protect, she had condemned us to a life of half-truths. I thought I was protecting you, but maybe I destroyed you. After Claire left, I sat for hours staring into space. Her revelation opened an old wound, but it also raised another question. How long will I carry this burden? Samantha's distance wasn't enough. Now there was also the awareness that part of that distance was sustained by decisions that weren't solely mine. I thought of Eric, of how he also carried this secret in silence. The father who could never be a father. The daughter who grew up not knowing who she really was. And me, at the center of it all, trying to piece together a story that was never told in its entirety. Was it fair to remain silent? Perhaps there is no right way to protect someone from the truth. Perhaps love, in its excess, confuses protection with omission. But what I feared most was that, by telling everything, Samantha would see me as a fraud. As someone who built a life on lies, even if the lies were chosen out of love. I took a deep breath, trying to imagine the moment I would finally tell her, Eric is your father. As if those words could change everything, or destroy what little we have left for good. The truth is heavy, but omission suffocates. And I'm tired of suffocating. If I tell her, I might lose her. If I don't, I've already lost. I found Eric in the garden as usual. He was watering the plants with that serene care he always had. As if tending to the earth was also a way of keeping the past dormant. But that day could no longer hold silences. I approached slowly, my heart tight, and he just looked up, as if he already knew. We sat on the wooden bench near the hydrangeas. The words took a while to come out, but the silence said everything. Claire was here yesterday, I began. He nodded slowly. She said I was convinced to hide it, but that I wanted to tell. Eric closed his eyes for a second, and in that gesture was the pain we had shared for decades. Do you remember the night she asked about her father? He didn't answer right away. Then he murmured, I do. You cried for the rest of the night. Remembering hurt. I shrank before the memories, as if I could protect myself from something that had already happened. Eric reached out his hand, but I hesitated. The guilt between us was a thick wall. And now? I asked. Is it too late? He looked at me as only he can, with that mix of tenderness and suffering. And then he said, almost in a whisper, You promised you would never say anything. You promised you would never say anything. Claire called me again. She said Samantha had gone to find Peter. My heart froze. He was the last person she should hear anything from. But it was also inevitable. She needed to put the pieces together on her own, even if she started with the wrong ones. And Peter always knew how to manipulate with mastery. Samantha went to him carrying the letter I wrote, perhaps hoping for a confirmation. But Peter was never a man to take responsibility. He told a cold, convenient version. She always tried to erase me from her life. She never wanted me to get close. Samantha listened in silence, as she always does when she's deciding what to believe. He knew how to distort the facts with the skill of someone who has spent a lifetime running from his own reflection. He said he tried to come back, but I stopped him. That I lied, manipulated, that I built a wall between him and his daughter. She was always good at that, he added. She makes it seem like she's protecting, when she's just hiding. And just like that, he planted doubt like a seed. Rachel told me later that Samantha left there in silence, her eyes fixed on the ground. And now once again my truth was being put on trial. And this time, by the words of someone who never had the courage to be a father. She was always good at manipulating stories. Don't be fooled. That night, Eric came to my house. The sky was heavy, as if it sensed the weight of the conversation to come. We sat in the living room without bright lights, just the dimness and the truth we had hidden for so long. She went to see Peter, I told him. I heard, he replied, with the weariness that came from his soul. We were silent for a while. Then, as if something in me had given way, I murmured, she needs to know. Eric looked at me for a few long seconds, and then, as if he could no longer bear the weight, he spoke. Then let me tell her. My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to stop him, to protect, to go back. But the time for silence was over. Christine, she's my daughter. And she has spent 26 years believing a lie. Those words, spoken with pain and love, still sounded unreal. I remembered the day I found out I was pregnant, the nights he stayed nearby in secret, how we decided together to keep it all hidden, out of fear, due to Claire's insistence, out of cowardice. Now, however, he was here, ready to face the consequences. And I knew that, no matter how much everything might fall apart, it was time. Because Samantha needed to know who she really was. Even if the truth came late, it was still the truth. But she never knew. And now she might never forgive me. Everything I built was based on lies. I learned from Rachel that Claire had gone after Peter. She couldn't stand to watch the manipulation happen all over again. Claire always had an unbending sense of justice, even when she was the one who helped hide the truth. But when faced with Peter, her morality resurfaced with force. She found him in front of the old bar where he used to spend too many nights. Without ceremony, she approached and said, "You don't have the right to show up now and play the victim." Peter feigned surprise, but Claire never fell for his acts. "She's confused because you twisted everything," she accused. "Like you always did." Peter tried to defend himself, saying he only told the truth. But Claire didn't let it slide. "Truth? You ran away, you lied. And now you want to pose as a father." She knew the story from the inside. The abandonment, the silence, the absence. And she knew his reappearance now wasn't out of remorse, but out of opportunity. A chance to regain control. "You didn't live with her tears at night, nor with Christine's pain in every silence," she said. "So don't come here now posing as a hero. You don't have that right." Peter didn't answer. He just lowered his head, as if, for a second, he felt the weight of his own reflection. "You don't have the right to pretend you were a father." When Samantha told me, days later, I noticed something different in her voice. Less illusion, more firmness. She had gone back to talk to Peter. This time not to listen but to ask. Eye to eye. "Why did you leave?" The question that had remained silent for so many years, finally spoken. Peter tried to evade it, as he always did. He used the old excuses. "I didn't know how to come back. Your mother didn't want me to show up." But Samantha was different now. She didn't accept it. She insisted. And, perhaps pressured by something he never understood, he finally caved. "I lied, yes. Because it was easier to be the victim than to admit what I did." She said. He cried. Not out of remorse, but out of shame. Because deep down, Peter knew. He had abandoned them. Not just me, but her. And for all those years, he let the pain be attributed to others, while hiding behind a convenient role. Samantha listened to it all in silence. "I didn't deserve to be a father," he said, looking at the floor. And, in that moment, the image she had of him began to crumble. Because there is no noble justification for someone who turns their back. And, even though it was late, he acknowledged, his absence was a choice. Cruel, conscious, irreversible. I preferred to be the victim rather than the villain. After that, Samantha went silent. She didn't contact me again. But I learned, through Rachel, that she was starting to piece things together on her own. The conversation with Peter had opened a new crack. If he lied, who else had lied? And, more importantly, what else was hidden beneath the conflicting versions? She went back to reviewing old letters, childhood photos, forgotten documents. She began to ask small questions to Claire, to Rachel, even to old neighbors. I could feel, from a distance, that something in her had changed. It was no longer just pain, it was a search. A quiet urgency to understand what was behind so many silences. Rachel tried to warn her cautiously. Not everything you're going to find will be pretty. But Samantha seemed determined. I need to know, she said. And I, on the other side of the city, felt her every step like a beat of my own heart. Because every answer she found would inevitably lead her to me. And to Eric. Now I could no longer stop it. I couldn't hide it. It was as if the truth had taken on a life of its own, clearing a path, pushing open doors I had tried to keep locked for decades. And deep down a question echoed. Am I prepared for when she finds out? What if everyone has been lying to me? Claire called me after Samantha had visited her. She said Samantha asked to see old boxes, things from her childhood, documents stored in the attic. Claire resisted at first but eventually gave in. She was determined, Christine. It wasn't curiosity, it was a search. And, while rummaging through the papers of the past, Samantha found more than she expected. Among albums and yellowed letters, there was a forgotten photo, me young, smiling next to Eric. His hand was on my back. We were at a picnic in the park. Claire said Samantha stared at that image for a long time, in silence, like someone who sees something and, suddenly, everything shifts inside their mind. It was an ordinary photo, but the context now turned it into evidence. Why was he with you? Why so close? Claire didn't know what to say. Maybe she made up a quick excuse, but Samantha is not naive. She notices nuances, gestures, glances. And in that picture, there was an intimacy impossible to ignore. I learned later that she kept the photo. She didn't say anything, just continued to search through the boxes with more caution, more precision. Like someone searching, no longer for memories, but for confirmation. And suddenly, all our secrets were threatened by a single forgotten fragment of the past. Why was he there, so close to my mother back then? Rachel has been a link that even I can't hate. Even knowing that her help is shortening the time I have left before the revelation, I can't wish her away. Samantha trusted her, and now Rachel is helping my daughter stitch together time. Date by date, moment by moment. The timeline of our lie. Together they spread out photos, letters, notes, diaries. Rachel organized them, noting what matched and what didn't. Samantha, in silence, watched it all. Why does Eric appear so many times in the early years and then disappear? Rachel asked quietly. And that question was like a crack that wouldn't stop growing. Some events didn't add up. Trips we didn't take. Dates that contradicted versions told by me and Claire. Slowly, Samantha began to realize that it wasn't just Peter who had distorted facts. The inconsistencies were everywhere. And with each passing day, the list of questions only grew. Rachel said that at the end of the day, Samantha stared at the constructed timeline as if it were a puzzle missing its central piece. Nothing will make sense until I find out what they're hiding from me, she said. And in that instant, the truth we resisted telling began to forge its own path. Something doesn't add up, and I'm going to find out what it is. I sat before the paper for the third time. The pen in my hands, my heart racing, my mind jumbled. I started by writing her name, Samantha, and stopped. I looked at that word as if it were a mirror. My broken reflection, my whole daughter. The letter would be my last attempt. But even that seemed to be slipping away from me now. I wrote a few lines trying to explain that it all began with fear. That Eric never wanted to be distant. That I was the one who prevented it. That Peter agreed to be the father because it was convenient. That Claire thought it was for the best. But the words seemed weak, empty, almost false. Even though they were true, they sounded like an excuse. The sentences began to lose their meaning. I crossed things out, started over, cried. I tried to say that love guided me, but I realized that love guided by fear is not a beacon. It's a fog. The letter turned into a draft of sorrows. And then I stopped. I simply stopped, because I realized it wasn't courage I lacked, it was forgiveness. And maybe I didn't have the right to ask for it. I left the paper half finished, folded and stored in the desk drawer. I stood up with a trembling body and a hollow chest. Maybe one day I'll be able to finish it. Maybe one day she'll want to listen. But for now, all I have are fragments that even I can't organize. Maybe I don't deserve her forgiveness. I found the letter by accident. I was rummaging through an old box in the bedroom closet, looking for an album to distract my mind, When I saw the yellowed envelope with my mother's handwriting, my heart raced. It had been years since I had read anything written by her. My hands trembled before I opened it. Inside, a carefully folded paper. It was a letter addressed to me, written shortly after Samantha's birth. It began with tenderness. If you are reading this, it's because doubt has come to visit you again. In each line, my mother tried to justify the silence she had convinced me to adopt. The silence that gnaws at me today. She said the truth could destroy Samantha, that no one would forgive a mother who hid something so profound. You must protect her from the world's judgment, she wrote, even if it costs you her love for you. Was it desperate advice or a final sentence? I'll never know. But there, among those words, I found the origin of my fear. I cried. For my mother. For myself. For Samantha. For all the women in our family who confused love with omission. I put the letter away again, as if it still had the power to decide my fate. And I asked myself, was she right? Or was she the one who started our cycle of silence? You must protect her from judgment, even if it costs you her love. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed, alone, hugging the pillow that still holds the scent of the past. I began to mentally revisit every stage of Samantha's life. Her first steps, the feverish nights, the drawings on the wall I never had the heart to erase. Everything seemed so close and at the same time unreachable. I remembered her adolescence, the fights over silly things that sound ridiculous today, the conversations in the kitchen, the birthday cards I kept like relics. I saw time passing too quickly, as if her childhood had slipped through my fingers. And the worst part, I realized how much I hid myself, even when she asked for my presence. I always thought I was protecting her. That silence was a shield. But now I realized that what she wanted most wasn't protection, it was truth. The truth I hid out of fear. And remembering everything we lived through, I felt a sharp pain for having wasted so many moments out of fear of losing something that was already falling apart. I saw her face at every age, her laughter, her tears, her small hands searching for mine. And I realized that every good memory also carries the shadow of what was never said. And perhaps that's what destroys me most now. Every memory was a sharp blade. It was supposed to be a quick conversation. Claire came to bring some old papers, but Eric showed up too, and the atmosphere quickly grew tense. She needs to know, he said. It's past time. Claire responded firmly. You think you can solve 26 years with a confession? I tried to intervene, but they both grew heated. The argument grew louder. You pressured me to hide it. You were part of this. Eric accused. Claire retorted. And you accepted, as if you had no choice. They were saying everything that, until then, was forbidden to be said aloud. Words I always feared would be heard by anyone. And they were. Outside, behind the slightly ajar door, Samantha was listening. Without us realizing she had arrived. She said nothing. Just listened, motionless, until the truth unraveled on its own. She deserves to know who she is. And she deserves to know that I'm her father, Eric said, his eyes welling up. Claire fell silent. And I fell apart inside. By the time I realized Samantha was there, it was too late. Our secrets were exposed, without filters, without restraints. And her gaze, still fixed, hurt more than any word spoken in that room. So it's true, all of it. The following days were of absolute silence. I called dozens of times, and no call was answered. Not even Rachel knew for sure where she was. She only said that Samantha had asked for space. I imagined the storm that must have been raging inside her. The pain of having the ground pulled out from under her. The name of her father redrawn. The truth crashing down like an avalanche. I spent nights sitting on the sofa, staring at the phone as if it could solve everything on its own. Waiting hurt, but speaking before she was ready would hurt more. And if I insisted, I could push her away for good. It was an agonizing limbo. Neither close nor far. Just absent. Me again, not knowing how to be her mother. Rachel told me to be patient, but guilt is impatient. Every minute without news felt like a punishment I had decreed myself. I remembered the first time I left her alone at school, and how she managed. Now it was different. It wasn't autonomy. It was emotional distance, an exile of the soul. I wondered what she was thinking. If she hated me. If she felt pity. or if she was just trying to reorganize her feelings before deciding what to do with me. And deep down, what hurt me most was the possibility that she might never come back. I don't know who I am anymore, or where I came from. It was Rachel who had the courage to break the silence. She told me she went to Samantha's apartment with a simple cake and a ready hug. "I didn't come to pressure you," she said. "I just came to remind you that you're not alone." And, for the first time since the revelation, Samantha cried. Not with anger, but with exhaustion. They sat on the living room floor, like two disoriented teenagers. Rachel listened to her for hours. Samantha vented, spoke of the pain, the feeling of having lived a borrowed story. "They deceived me my whole life," she said. "How can I trust again?" Rachel, with her serene patience, simply replied, "Maybe you don't. But maybe you'll want to understand." It was there, between a cup of tea and a silent tear, that Samantha allowed herself to be vulnerable. "I love my mother," she confessed. "But I don't know if I know who she is anymore." Rachel, with wisdom, didn't try to justify anything. She just offered her presence. And that, in itself, was a starting point. In the end, Samantha said something that made me hold my breath when I found out. "Maybe I need to hear it from my mother. For the last time." It was a little, but it was more than I had in the last few days. It was hope wrapped in pain. Maybe I need to hear it from my mother. For the last time. I received the message early in the morning. A short, direct text, with no nicknames or softeners. "We can talk, but I need to hear everything. No filters. No excuses." My heart beat so hard I had to sit down. There was no emotion in those words, only a demand. It was an invitation but also a summons. She scheduled the meeting for the next day, at the cafe where we used to have lunch on Sundays. I went there hours early, not knowing how to act. I read and reread my mother's letter, trying to decide whether to show it to her or not. I mentally reviewed every detail of the past, preparing myself for the pain of saying them out loud. I sat at the table with cold hands. When she arrived, she seemed older, firmer. Her eyes were hard, but there was a weariness that revealed her fragility. "I don't want any beating around the bush," she said. "I want to hear it from you. The whole truth. Even if it hurts. Even if it changes everything." I nodded, because it was all I could do. And then, before any words could leave my mouth, she added, with the firmness of someone who can no longer stand to live in the dark, "Tell me everything. No more lies." I took a deep breath and started from the beginning. Not the easiest part, but the most honest. I told her that Eric had always been by my side, long before Peter entered my life. That I loved him, but fear and Claire's pressure made me follow another path. And when I found out I was pregnant, everything became complicated. I explained that Peter agreed to assume paternity for convenience. Not out of love, nor duty, but out of cowardice and comfort. And that Eric, silently, agreed to stay on the sidelines. I told her that Claire thought the truth would destroy our family, and that I, weak, gave in. I hid in a lie that ate me up from the inside for 26 years. Samantha didn't interrupt me. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. Then, I took my mother's letter out of my pocket. I handed it to her. I asked her to read it when she was ready. She asked me to hide it. She said it was to protect you. My voice was failing, but I continued. Because that was the only path to something real between us. Finally, I lowered my eyes and said what should have been said long ago. "You deserve to know who you are. And you deserve to choose what to do with this truth. I failed, daughter. And maybe you'll never forgive me. But I couldn't leave you in the dark anymore. I didn't tell you out of fear. Not of you, but of myself." Her silence after my confession was more terrifying than any scream. Samantha sat there, motionless, her eyes locked on me, with no clear expression. I feared she was planning an escape, that my every word had only deepened her disappointment. But she didn't get up. She just kept looking at me, as if seeing beyond the pain. After long minutes she spoke. Her voice was low but firm. That was a lot to process. I nodded. I didn't expect immediate forgiveness, nor acceptance. But what came next completely disarmed me. She moved closer, and with a simple gesture, she hugged me. A quiet hug, full of everything that had been missing for so long. There in her arms, I felt that maybe there was still a way forward. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a sign that something could begin again. She didn't say anything else. She just let me cry, let me hold her hand tightly, as I did so many times when she was a child. The pain was still between us, but now there was room for something new. Understanding. Because Samantha realized that behind the wrong choices, there was someone trying to love in the only way she knew how. And for the first time in a long time, I felt I was no longer alone. I don't know what to do with all this, but I don't want to lose you. In the following days there were no promises, no grand gestures. Just small approaches that, to me, were worth more than any apology. Samantha would send me short messages. Good morning, Mom. Sometimes she would ask if I wanted to get coffee, and I would go without rush, without plans, just to be near her again. We talked about simple things. Books, movies, the weather. As if we were relearning how to talk to each other. And that's what it was. A new language made of patience and presence. The past still came up sometimes, with questions that hurt, but it no longer separated us. Now it was just ground we had to cross together. Eric, with his discreet manner, kept his distance at first, but I could tell he was rooting for us from afar. One day, Samantha asked me if she could get to know him better. I nodded with a shy smile, and it was like opening another window where there had only been walls. A new beginning is not a return. It's something new. Today we still stumble over the old silences, but there is affection. There is effort. And most importantly, there is truth. For the first time, we are not invented versions of ourselves. We are a mother and daughter trying to find each other in what was left after the fall. And, in this rubble, we discovered that we can still rebuild. The truth broke us, but maybe it can heal us. A few months later on a sunny weekend, Eric asked if he could introduce Samantha to his younger brother, Thomas. Nothing serious, he said. Just lunch, a conversation. I hesitated at first. I was afraid of pressuring her with new connections. But she accepted naturally, which was already a sign of growth. The meeting was light, almost casual. Thomas is extroverted, good-humored, and quickly built bridges with Samantha. They talked about music, travel, movies. They laughed. I watched from a distance, surprised by how easily she opened up. Perhaps seeing a piece of Eric's story outside the context of the lie brought some relief. She told me later as we walked to the car. He's kind. And he seems sincere. I smiled. It was the first time I heard Samantha talk about someone from Eric's family without a shadow behind her voice. She was little by little, recognizing that family is not just what hurts us. It's also what welcomes us. Seeing the two of them together made me think that bonds can be built even after a rupture. It was no longer about blood or secrets. It was about choice. And by choosing to be there, she made space for something new. Something that was never planned, but that now made sense. Maybe there are other bonds worth creating. Today, Samantha lives in another neighborhood. In a small apartment with plants in the window and books stacked everywhere. I'm still in the same house, now quieter, but with her presence scattered in small details. We see each other often. Sometimes we have lunch at the same cafe as before, without the tension that separated us. We talk about the present, sometimes about the future. We rarely touch on the past, not out of fear, but because it has already been said, it has already been faced. Now we build our relationship based on who we are, not on what we hide. There is no longer an expectation of perfection, just presence, just the affection that is possible. She sends me photos of her daily life. A dish she learned to cook, a quote from a book, her new haircut. I reply with emojis with proud of you, with invitations for coffee. Sometimes she comes over without notice, and those are the visits that touch me the most. As if she's saying, this is still home. I realize we are no longer mother and daughter in the old way. We are women who love each other, despite everything. And perhaps this is the most mature way to love, the one that respects spaces, but doesn't let go of the bond. Our love no longer lives under the same roof, but now it lives in peace. With time, I decided to turn everything I lived through into words. Not to clear my guilt, but to understand the path I walked. I wrote each chapter with caution, with pain, with care. I called the book Between Closed Doors, because it was behind them that I built and destroyed so much. It was a kind of settling of accounts with myself. I wrote about motherhood not as an ideal, but as an imperfect journey. About the weight of silence, about choices made out of fear disguised as love. I wrote about Claire, about Eric, about Peter, but especially about Samantha. Not with pity or regret, but with admiration for the woman she became in spite of me. When I finished, I didn't think about publishing it. It was too intimate, but I showed it to her. I placed the notebook in her hands and waited, in silence, as I had so many times waited for answers that never came. She read it all in one night. The next day, she appeared at my door with teary eyes and a small smile. "You wrote our story with courage," she said. "And now it's mine too." I hugged my daughter like someone holding a newly opened book, because I understood that, as much as we had started with torn pages, we could still write new chapters together. She locked the door, but today, we opened a new window together. Now, I'm curious about you who have heard my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you been through something similar? Support the channel by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing this video. I'm leaving another story on the end screen that you'll also enjoy, and it will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.